Welcome to the Eversio Experience, the podcast where functional mushrooms meet real life, real science, and real people who are ready to feel better than they ever thought possible. I'm Brandi Garden. I'm the co-founder here at Eversio Wellness, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host, Dr. Desiree Caruso, naturopathic physician.
Hi, everyone. Mushrooms are symbols of interconnectedness. And every episode, we are here to connect you with the health, the wisdom, and the science that fungi have brought us on our own journey to this moment. We believe functional mushrooms are critical to the maintenance of our physical well-being, our mental clarity, and our collective vitality. These organisms have sustained life on this planet for hundreds of millions of years. And it turns out they have a lot to offer us too.
Yes, and our ancestors knew this. They had deep, intuitive, cultural connections to mushrooms long before modern science caught up. And yet today, in a world where we should know better, fungi remain understudied, undervalued, and wildly misunderstood. And that is exactly why we're here, because Eversio means change, and it's our mission to change lives through fungi.
There's a mushroom for every moment.
And we're so glad that you are here to share this one with us. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Eversio Experience. I'm Brandi, and today I've got Dr. Desiree Caruso, naturopathic physician, with me. She's the person I call when I need the science to actually make sense of all these things.
Always happy to be here. And today's topic is one that I enjoy talking about because I think it reframes something that a lot of people have been confused about for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's where we're starting today. I want to paint a picture for you. I really want you to sit with this because I think a lot of people out there listening are going to recognize this immediately. Not depressed, not in crisis, functioning, showing up, really from the outside, everything looks fine. You know who I'm talking about? You're running a career, you are managing a household, the one that all of those other people in your life lean on. You are doing all of it, but something is still off. And sometimes these people can't even quite name it.
Totally. And I see this as well in practice and see it in so many women in my life as well.
Yeah. It's a topic that I think we probably should have spoken of sooner, but today's the day because we're headed away on a girls' weekend, to be honest, this weekend. And I think that it's something that has touched every woman I know at some point, at some age and stage. So, and I'll describe it to you. It's that 3 p.m. wall that hits every single day, even when you slept okay. It's that irritability that comes out of nowhere and doesn't really match the situation you're in. It's just this surprise, I'm irritated for some reason. It's the lying awake at 2 a.m. with your mind running inventories on things that you cannot control. It's the brain fog in the meeting where you used to be sharper. It's the feeling of going through the motions in a life that you actually love. You're present in your body, but somewhere else entirely in your mind.
And if you go to your doctor, oftentimes you get told that everything is normal. Your blood work is totally fine. You are healthy. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's just your age. And oftentimes you walk out feeling more experiencing than when you first walked.
Ugh, what a gross feeling, because you've been told there is no explanation, which means either you're imagining it or this is just who you are now. And you're not quite ready to accept that.
And that gap between how someone feels and what, maybe conventional medicine can see or what the practitioner can see is a powerful catalyst that we can encounter. And it is also why people start looking in other directions.
Yeah, which is often what leads people to functional mushrooms, right? Here's our Eversio community. They came for a reason. They didn't come to us because everything was perfect and fantastic. And today we're going to answer the question that so many of you out there are asking once you arrive here. Can these mushrooms actually do something for here's the word, for my mood? And if so, how does that happen? Like, what's actually happening in my body? And my mom is one of our loyal listeners out there. We love you, mama. This is her standing in the kitchen going like, break it down. I'm a smart person. I want to know the science. What's actually happening in my body from the time I put these mushrooms inside? And I love you, Mom, for asking that, because if you're thinking it, others are. So today we're focusing on two mushrooms. We're going to talk about lion's mane and reishi. And we are going to go deep. We're going to go into the specific compounds. We're going into the research. And by the end of this episode, you are going to understand exactly why these two mushrooms have a real mechanistic relationship with how you feel. Not just that they do something, but how.
And I really appreciate that we are doing it this way because this community deserves the actual science and not a headline, but actually going into the mechanism, which is part of the Eversio experience. That's exactly what we do. Educating, going into the science and knowing.
Yeah, being nerdy. So let's go. Okay, so Dr. Desiree, before we get into the mushrooms themselves, I just want to make sure that we set up the foundation because I think the word mood gets flattened into something that kind of feels soft or psychological. And what you've really helped me understand over these years is that mood is actually a physiological state.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction because mood is not just a feeling that exists in your mind. It is also downstream of what is happening in your nervous system, your stress hormones, your gut, your neurochemistry, your sexual hormones, and the structural health of your brain. And all of these systems feeding into each other continuously in real time. So when your mood is off, when you're feeling flat, maybe anxious, irritable, or foggy, there can be a biological reason. Something in that system is asking for support. And that means that there are biological inputs that can meaningfully change it.
Yeah, which is the whole premise of what we're talking about today. So these mushrooms are interacting with that system at a root level, not masking symptoms like some other things out there we might use, but addressing that underlying physiology. My favorite thing.
Right. And I think that's why people who start to take functional mushrooms for one reason, say, immune support or energy, often do notice an unexpected shift in how they also are feeling emotionally. Like it's not a coincidence. It is the same system responding.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk lion's mane first because it's my favorite. And I want to specifically get into the terpenoids, the haricinones, because I think this is where the real story lives. And it's not something that people even know what we're saying when we say that word. So let's go.
Okay, so lion's mane, the Latin name is Hericium erinaceus, is very unique in that it contains triterpenes or terpenoids, which you may have heard us talk about before. And there are specific triterpenes or terpenoids that are unique to lion's mane, and they are called haricinones. They are found in the fruiting body. And that is important because there's research on them. And what makes these compounds like haricinones extraordinary is something that very few natural compounds can do, and they can cross the blood-brain barrier. They can get into the brain.
Yeah, not an easy thing to do. We've looked. Not many things can do this.
Yeah, it's quite rare. So the blood-brain barrier is a highly selective filtration system. Most things in the bloodstream can't get through it. These terpenoids are lipophilic, meaning they're fat soluble, and that molecular structure allows them to cross over. And it also their molecular weight also plays into a factor there. So once they're in the brain, they are able to stimulate the synthesis of two neurotrophic proteins, nerve growth factor, NGF, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF.
Love it. I'm going to get those two things tattooed on my body one day.
I could see that.
So let's, I mean, I love lion's mane and I love brains, and that's the intersection of the two. So let's talk about why that matters for mood specifically, because I think most people associate NGF and BDNF with cognition and memory, right? It's showing up all the time in the research we read where how do people actually get smarter when they've had some type of mild cognitive impairment? But there's a mood piece here that doesn't get talked about enough.
Right. So BDNF is actually the mechanism through which most antidepressant medications may produce their effects. It's believed with some of the research. That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. We don't hear about that with medications. It's typically neurotransmitters. And one leading hypothesis in psychiatry for why antidepressants work is that they may ultimately raise BDNF levels, which promotes neurogenesis, new neuron growth. in the hippocampus. And low BDNF is one of the most consistently documented biological markers in people that are experiencing depression and chronic anxiety. And we see this in research on functional mushrooms and in mood.
Yes. Like, I can't wait for the day when that's a home test. Like, why am I feeling this way? And can we just get a scan, instead of having to go get blood work, can we just scan? And I've looked, we're not far off from this. And what's low? What's high? What could be connected? So just that little piece of information that this could be one thing you haven't looked at hasn't been measured because we don't measure it, right? Nobody's seeing that on your general lab report. So the fact that lion's mane contains compounds that stimulate the same neurotrophin that antidepressants are thought to work through, massive, massive.
Yeah, massive. And it's not something that is, I would say, mainstream or even really thought of, right? Daying in the research. And, it's also what you just mentioned is an accurate way to frame the preclinical and mechanistic evidence. Now, I do want to be clear that, human clinical evidence for lion's mane is specifically still building. Just as we know with functional mushrooms, we don't have massive randomized control trials that, the way we do for pharmaceuticals and comparing apples to apples, but we have strong mechanistic evidence, a growing body of animal studies showing genuine antidepressant-like effects in hippocampal neurogenesis and BDNF induction, and early human trials pointing consistently in that same direction. So that's kind of, your informed consent piece in terms of what the reality is of research, but we also have N of 1 studies from all the people who have shared that and experiencing it ourselves.
And I think it's worth it we say this all the time, but I'm going to say it again here because if this is your first podcast, welcome. And we'll just fill you in on why we believe there isn't really enough great research on mushrooms. And when I say not enough, and I repeat this all the time, if I go on PubMed, which is widely available, it's free for anyone to go and look at this collection of research on the internet. There are over 7,000 studies on medicinal mushrooms. So you can do it right now. Open up Google, go to PubMed, type in medicinal mushrooms. You're going to see what I see. Over 7,000 clinical trials representing over 40 indications that mushrooms could be used for in a clinical trial. So it's not that there's no research, but what Dr. Desiree is explaining to you is a money situation. Nobody wants to invest, not nobody, very few people want to invest in the clinical research cost that would be required when they aren't going to be able to patent a drug at the end of the research. Mother Nature's building these mushrooms. Mother Nature is the creator of haricinones. So no pharmaceutical company is going to be able to take haricinones and charge you $2,000 a month for an injection of them. That's not going to happen. And if they can't do that, if they can't make money on it, they're just not interested and therefore they won't do the research. So you've got little mushroom companies like us, and I mean, we are one of thousands and thousands. The mushroom research that's being done is mostly in Asia because they're so much further ahead and they are using some of these compounds in place of or alongside pharmaceuticals. But here in North America, if you're not making a ton of money at it and doing it quickly, it gets pushed aside. And that's just sad. So Dr. Desiree, walk us through some of the human studies that we actually are lucky enough to have.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. So let's go ahead. So there was this 2019 study that was published in the Journal of Medicinal Food, and they had participants taking lion's mane supplementation for 8 weeks. They saw reductions in depression, anxiety, and sleep disruption. And they also measured increased levels of pro-BDNF, which is a precursor to BDNF. And that was a meaningful finding because it gave them a biological marker, not just a self-reported outcome. There was this separate randomized controlled trial published in Biomedical Research, and they looked at participants experiencing menopause-related mood disturbances over 4 weeks. They found reductions in irritability and anxiety that the researchers attributed to the neuroregenerative effects of the mushroom. And a 2023 pilot trial in healthy adults found a trend toward reduced perceived stress after 28 days of supplementation.
Now, here is something I want to acknowledge directly because I think honesty matters more than hype. And those studies are all relatively small, but the field is growing. The fact that we didn't just talk about one, it's being done again and it's being done again. And although they're small, this is how good research begins. So we're not sitting here claiming that lion's mane is a clinical intervention for diagnosed mood disorders, right? Do not come at us about that. But there is a growing field of interest and evidence happening right now. It's science in progress, and you're part of it just by listening to this.
Correct. And I really like that framing. What we're saying is there is a genuine, well understood biological mechanism by which these specific terpenoid compounds interact with the neurochemistry of mood. The early human evidence is consistent and it's promising. And for somebody who is experiencing the kind of low grade mood dysregulation that we described at the top of the episode here, not crisis, just not quite themselves. That mechanism is directly relevant.
Absolutely. Okay. And there's actually a third pathway here that I find fascinating and we talk about all the time, and it is the gut-brain axis, because lion's mane is doing something really interesting in the gut as well.
And I think this is actually one of my favorite pieces of the lion's mane story, because the gut and the brain are in a continuous two-way communication through what's called the gut-brain axis. Roughly 90% of your serotonin, your primary mood neurotransmitter, is produced in the gut, not in the brain. So what does that tell you?
The first time I heard that, I was like, did I read that right? I got to go back and read that again. That research that discovered 90% of the serotonin produced in your gut, that was done right here at UBC in Vancouver, where we live. And I think about it every day. Come on, gut, I'm treating you well because you're going to give me the serotonin that feels so good. Okay, tell us more.
Well, what does that tell you, right? About the fact that your gut is responsible and related to your mood symptoms. So lion's mane contains prebiotic compounds that support the gut microbiome. Research published in Frontiers in Nutrition in 2025 that found that lion's mane increases the abundance of short-chain fatty acid producing bacteria in the gut. These short-chain fatty acids travel to the brain either by crossing the blood-brain barrier or through signaling along the vagus nerve, which is our rest and digest nerve. And they directly modulate neuroinflammation and the brain circuits involved in mood and cognition.
That just made my mom so happy. It's literally what I think I stood in the kitchen and described that, not as eloquently as you do, to her. Like, tell me what happens, and explaining to her that these short chain fatty acids, that they're this big piece, right? This bacteria in your gut, and then they travel. And the fact that they can get through the blood-brain barrier is like, that's the mushroom intelligence that we want to get through to people all the time, but it takes a whole podcast sometime to get there. So essentially, lion's mane is working from three directions simultaneously, right? We've got the haricinones crossing the blood-brain barrier and actually getting in your brain and stimulating nerve growth factor and BDNF directly. We've got the anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects of those terpenoids reducing neuroinflammation, which is so often what we recognize. Like, I saw my brain on an MRI. If you've got inflammation in your brain, you're not being optimal you. And then we've got the gut microbiome support, feeding the mood circuitry via this gut-brain axis.
That's exactly it. And this is why you can't reduce lion's mane to a single mechanism. And I think that can be said about all functional mushrooms too, because it's this multi-pathway intervention. And for lion's mane, for brain and mood health, you can think of it like upgrading the operating system, not just patching one bug that you have.
Oh, I love that. It's infrastructure. So you're not chasing a symptom, you're building a better functioning system underneath it. Cool. All right. Okay, let's go to reishi, because reishi is where the conversation really shifts entirely. It's a different mushroom, completely different mechanism, speaking to a completely different root cause. So, Dr. Desiree, let's get into the ganoderic acids, the triterpenes that are unique to reishi.
So reishi, which is Ganoderma lucidum, that is the Latin name, has been used in traditional Chinese medicine for over 2,000 years, where it is called Ling Ji, the mushroom of immortality. And modern pharmacology is now starting to explain why it earned that reputation. Reishi contains over 400 bioactive compounds, but the ones that are most relevant for mood and the nervous system are its triterpenes, specifically a class called ganoderic acids. Ganoderic acid A, C, and D are the most studied of those. And like the triterpenes in lion's mane, like the haricinones, they are lipophilic. They cross the blood-brain barrier and they directly influence nervous system function.
Yep. And they interact with the stress response.
Yeah, profoundly. Okay, so let me explain the HPA axis because I think this is a piece that connects everything basically. So HPA stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It is the command center of your stress response, basically. So when your brain perceives a threat, real or imagined, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenal glands, which release cortisol, your stress hormone. And that's that system, that's that highway. In a healthy, balanced state, cortisol rises in the morning to get you going. And then it declines throughout the day so that you can wind down and sleep. And then melatonin rises so that you sleep. That is that natural rhythm that we have. When you are under chronic stress, which for people listening, many people listening, is just the baseline of modern life, really, with all of the things in our modern life, that HPA axis can get stuck in overactivation. Cortisol can stay elevated when it should be coming down, or cortisol might actually be too low. So this chronically elevated cortisol or dysregulated cortisol production can be associated with anxiety, low mood, emotional reactivity, disrupted sleep, brain fog, and also what I would call as, a general erosion of the person's felt sense of themselves.
Wow. A general erosion of their felt sense. That hits. You said something back about how it could be real or imagined. And I think that we don't want to skip over that because people are thinking, but I'm not stressed. Like I'm not having an emotional reaction. I'm not stressed out about a specific event or somebody that, came at me or a thing I have to do. But Dr. Desiree said, when your brain perceives a threat, real or imagined, that hypothalamus is signaling the pituitary to start this domino effect. So we're talking about your thoughts. We're talking about you sitting there in your home with no real danger around you, but just thinking about the past or thinking about the future. You're anywhere other than the present moment, healed and healthy and in satisfaction. Anytime you're out of that, you can be unknowingly, subconsciously triggering this system to get going. And I think that's so important that we have to understand you might not even know it. You might not even know that you're in chronic stress because we have normalized it. As a humanity, I think we have normalized it. T-Rex does not have to be coming at us in order for us to be in this state. And if that could be the reason that so many people are in this mood and don't understand why, I love that this is a really simple answer. And it can be free. It could be free to you if that's all it takes is to get out of that chronic state. So it's this physiological state that we're describing at the top of the episode, right? The person who is functioning, but not truly well, or what we would describe as well. This wired, but exhausted, and then irritable without a reason.
And I will say clinically, this can present as somebody, like you said, who I'm not stressed, but they're like tapping their foot very, and they're drinking tons of coffee and there is no rest or space in the day. It's somebody who might even say, I struggle with weight and I don't know. I'm doing all the things. I'm doing all the things. And you could just feel their energy, right? And chronically elevated cortisol is one of the most common and also most under-recognized drivers of that experience, as well as like chronically low cortisol too, right? A dysregulated cortisol where there isn't this diurnal pattern. And this is where reishi's ganoderic acids do something significant. Research shows that these triterpenes interact with corticotropin releasing hormone receptors and modulate the hypothalamic signaling that drives cortisol production. They're not suppressing cortisol across the board. They're helping restore the natural rhythm, the true modulating effects that functional mushrooms have. Cortisol where it should be, when it should be, and that bidirectional regulation is the definition of an adaptogen. It is not sedating, it's not stimulating, it's normalizing, modulating.
And this is why I think we have some people in our community that take reishi during the day. And so often we talk about the research around reishi and sleep. But if you are somebody that's really, you're hearing yourself in this stress realization, the bit of anxiety, this mood situation, maybe just moving reishi to the morning instead of at night allows you to experience it a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a 2026 right here. We're sitting here in 2026. So this is what we're saying. The science is new. It's up to date. It hasn't stopped. We're still interested and in fact getting more interested as we develop more methods just to test. The science is getting better. So there was a 2026 randomized controlled trial that is really compelling about this. Can you tell us about that one, Dr. Des, the new one?
Yeah, it was a 12-week study, and they gave participants a blend of medicinal mushrooms, including reishi. And by week 6, they were already seeing significant reductions in both anxiety scores and serum cortisol levels. By week 12, they also found measurable reductions in ACTH, which is the pituitary hormone, so pituitary in our brain, that triggers cortisol production in the first place, and reductions in CRP, which is a marker of inflammation. So all of which supports HPA axis modulation and that entire mechanism of modulating that stress response of the highway from our brain to our adrenal glands, which produce cortisol.
Yeah. So we're not saying it. The data is saying it. And it's so nice to have the data say it, to say, here. And,
Yeah.
if your doctor's saying that will never work, here's this
Yeah.
study you can look at. It's not me saying it. So that inflammation piece is we talk about it all the time, right? Inflammation is so often at the root cause of these downstream symptoms. And it does matter because I think people sometimes separate the conversation about inflammation from the conversation about mood, but they are completely connected. I know that was true for me.
And I think they should be in the same conversation because neuroinflammation is increasingly recognized as one of the primary biological drivers of anxiety and mood disorders. And we see this in people who change their diets and clean it up, removing the processed sugars and inflammatory oils and all of those things that contribute to inflammation and neuroinflammation. When the brain is inflamed, the entire emotional regulation system is compromised. Reishi's triterpenes have these well-documented anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties, and a lot of functional mushrooms are antioxidant by nature as well. But by reducing systemic and central inflammation, central meaning like central nervous system or brain, they're creating a more stable neurological environment for mood.
So cool. Okay. So let's talk about GABA. Because this is really the third mechanism in Reishi's mood story. And I think it's one that explains this in a way that people will actually feel when Reishi is working, which is so often what we get. Like, I'm not sure if it's working. Is it working? I don't really know, because it's not like a pharmaceutical, right? You're not going to feel stimulated. Like we experience that like we would with caffeine or other stimulants. And it's not sedative. So it's not like taking Gravol and you can't keep your eyes open. And that's what we're used to experiencing. So then we have an expectation and you've got to wipe that out. So what will we actually feel when reishi is a good quality reishi product that's actually working?
GABA is the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. It is the signal that says, slow down, calm down, we are safe. GABA is what you feel when you take reishi and you feel physiologically calm. It is that neurological off switch. So when GABA signaling is insufficient, which often it can be in states of chronic stress, the nervous system stays in a state of hypervigilance. The anxiety that doesn't have a specific cause, the inability to wind down, the mind that won't stop running. So research is suggesting that reishi's triterpenes, the ganoderic acids specifically, can modulate GABA receptor activity. So a 2012 study published in Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior found that reishi extract produced measurable effects on GABA signaling in the central nervous system, so in our brain, with corresponding reductions in anxiety-related brain activity. So cool. The effect has been described as similar in direction to how benzodiazepines work, supporting the calming system, but through a gentle non-dependency producing mechanism. Now, if you're unfamiliar with benzodiazepines, those are a pharmaceutical that can be prescribed for mood-related disorders and anxiety, but it's only to be used short term. It's kind of like, if you need some significant support. But there is a dependency. There can be a dependency with benzodiazepines, but there isn't with reishi. So the fact that, mechanistically it's similar, working on the same things, but there's no dependency and it's a natural thing is a really cool option.
Hey everyone, I just want to pause for a second here and talk to you about something because it's directly related to what we've been getting into today. So, a few years ago, I started losing words mid sentence. Not in a scary, diagnosable way, just that the word would be there and then it wouldn't. And I'd be in conversation and I'd feel the gap where my thinking used to be seamless. And I chalked it up to stress, to being busy, to getting older. I was wrong. What I was experiencing was a brain that wasn't being supported. And when I found lion's mane and understood what it actually does, not in a vague wellness way, but at the level of neuroscience, everything changed.
Lion's mane is one of the most researched functional mushrooms in existence, and it contains bioactive compounds like haricinones that stimulate nerve growth factor production. That is your brain actively building and repairing neural pathways. There is nothing else in the natural world that does this quite so directly. Our lion's mane capsules deliver 4,000 milligrams quantity crude equivalent per capsule, an 8-to-1 dual extract made from 100% whole fruiting body. That is a therapeutic dose, the dose the research actually used to get the results being claimed. Not a token amount so the ingredient can appear on the label. A real dose that puts you in the range where the science says things happen.
Yeah, 2 capsules in the morning. That's it. It's not a complicated protocol. It's not 6 pills before breakfast. And the shift is not dramatic. It's not a buzz or a jolt. It's more like you notice that you stopped losing the thread, that the afternoon is sharper than it used to be, that you're back to finding the word. So if you've been wondering whether something is off with your cognitive function and you've been quietly writing it off as stress or age or just the price of doing too much, well, I want you to hear this. It is not inevitable, and lion's mane is the place I would start.
Head over to eversiowellness.com and use code podcast15 at checkout. It'll save you 15% on your order, and it's for our whole community. Any order, anytime.
Your brain built everything you are proud of, and it deserves to be supported. Yes. And why are our general practitioners not offering this? Because they didn't learn about it in school. Because they are only taught about indication, pharmaceutical. And if you're lucky enough to have a doctor that has educated themselves outside of what is in the general medical school curriculum to talk about herbs, to talk about fungi, to talk about nutrition, meditation, sleep, all of these other lifestyle factors, they just don't know. They're not, they're not bad or uneducated. It's just that this isn't something that's in that curriculum. So this is where you really, this is why we have Dr. Desiree, friends. This is why we have Dr. Des, because it is such a meaningful distinction, right? A lot of people who are dealing with anxiety have been offered benzos, they call them the benzos, or other interventions that come with significant trade-offs. Every pharmaceutical has a side effect that is treated with another pharmaceutical. That's written in my book in chapter 1. Every single one. So what you're describing, Dr. Desiree, is reishi supporting the same calming pathway through a fundamentally different mechanism.
Yeah, and you're not flooding the system. You're supporting its natural function, modulating. And I think that matters enormously for long-term neurological health.
Yeah, and the sleep piece, because I want to make sure that we don't skip this. Sleep and mood are so tightly coupled that you can't really talk about one without talking about the other.
I think so. I think they are inseparable. Chronically disrupted sleep literally changes how your brain processes emotional information. The amygdala, which is your brain's threat detection center, becomes more reactive when you are sleep deprived. You experience more emotional volatility, more catastrophizing, like this is the worst, more sensitivity to perceived criticism. None of that is a character flaw. It's also this neurological state that can be caused by insufficient sleep. We're not feeling like our best self. So it's much harder. And reishi can address this sleep issue through 2 of the mechanisms that we just talked about, by helping to normalize the cortisol rhythm so that cortisol isn't elevated at 11 p.m. when you are trying to wind down, and that's when you want it to be low and melatonin to be high in our body, but also by supporting the GABAergic signaling that allows the nervous system to actually shift into this restful state. There's also research showing that adenosine, which is a nucleoside present in reishi extract, may play a role in building sleep pressure. Adenosine is that same molecule that accumulates in the brain throughout the day to create the drive towards sleep. And you may have heard of adenosine before from Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's talked about this on his podcast with delaying coffee and adenosine. So cool that reishi is involved in that potentially too.
Yeah, go listen to that. Maybe we can link that episode down to It's fascinating to me. We talk about adenosine, and we actually have tested our cordyceps products for adenosine in the past because cordycepin and adenosine are naturally present in a cordyceps mushroom at levels higher than you would find them other places. So in learning about that, I've listened to his research as well. And it is, I mean, if you're a coffee drinker and you haven't heard this episode, you need to do it. So basically what we're saying here is reishi is not a sedative. It's not knocking you out. It is removing the physiological obstacles to sleep, that elevated cortisol, that underfunctioning GABA, that hyperactive nervous system. And then it's letting your body do what it already knows how to do.
Yeah, that's a perfect description. You are not bypassing the system. You are restoring it.
Okay. I want to take a moment here and just bring this back to the person that we described at the beginning. I know you're listening out there because I think what's happening for this person is that they have tried a lot of things, right? They have read the studies on sleep hygiene. They've done their breath work. They might even go to Pilates. They might be beside me on a mat at hot yoga at night. They're taking their magnesium, and some of it does help a little. But the problem is that they're trying to manage the symptoms while the underlying physiology is still asking for support that it hasn't been getting.
Yeah. And this is part of the framing that I use with patients as well. Your yoga practice, your breathwork practice, your morning mantra ritual, whatever that is, those are all working in the right direction. They're asking the nervous system to regulate. It's also self-love. But if your HPA axis has been overactivated for years, if your GABA signaling is compromised, if your nerve growth factor and BDNF are not where they need to be because of diet, lifestyle, or just an accumulation of things and stress, you're essentially asking the system to perform while running below capacity. And at some point, willpower cannot compensate for biology. Even though we think it can, we can biohack our way to compensate.
Yeah. We think, I'm strong, I'm tough, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I think we need to say this is not failure of discipline, it's failure of support.
Exactly. And I think that lion's mane and reishi are providing that kind of biological support that practices alone can't deliver. They're not replacing those practices. They're creating a more receptive system for them to work in.
Yeah. I had someone from the Eversio community describe it to me recently as what she said is after about 6 weeks of taking lion's mane and reishi together consistently, her meditation finally started working. And that makes my meditator heart so happy. She'd already been meditating for a couple of years, but she always found her mind too busy to truly settle the way she wanted. And suddenly the practice just clicked for her. And she said, I don't think the meditation changed. I think my nervous system finally had the support it needed to go there. And I experienced this the first time I did a long meditation retreat, a week-long retreat. We did over 40 hours of meditation there. And I was taking lion's mane in the morning and reishi before. And I know I was experiencing something different than the people who were beside me, that just it took longer to get the experience that's available to us when we support the body. So I love when people share those stories with us. So if you're someone who's experienced something great by combining lion's mane and reishi, tell us, drop it in the comments, send us a message. We want to hear about it so that we can share it with others.
It doesn't surprise me at all because I think this is exactly what a more regulated HPA axis, better GABA tone, and improved neuroplasticity would feel like in practice. Things are just better.
All right. So practical section, because we always want to send people away with something that they can actually use. So Dr. Desiree, if someone is listening to this and recognizing themselves in these descriptions, how do they think about which mushroom to prioritize?
I like to do this as a self-diagnostic thing because I think people often know their own experience better than they realize. Maybe they just haven't, taken the time to really do it. So I'll walk through two profiles. If your mood struggle feels primarily like anxiety or reactivity and inability to wind down, if you're tired, you're wired when you should be resting, if you're emotionally reactive in ways that feel disproportionate to who you are, if you're waking up at 3 a.m. with a racing mind, or if your nervous system feels like it's running hot, reishi is where I would start because the root is an overactivated stress response. And reishi is directly addressing that through the HPA axis, cortisol regulation, and GABA support. So if any of those resonated with you, reishi is your girl. If your mood struggle feels more like flatness, fog, low engagement, if the color has been turned down, if you're going through the motions, if your thinking feels a little bit slower and your emotional range has narrowed, if you're present but not quite there, there's just something about it, lion's mane is where I would start because the root is more likely to be neurological. Nerve growth factor and BDNF support, gut microbiome and gut brain axis support, reducing the neuroinflammation that dims that whole system. Lion's mane, I would say, is
There
your
you
go-to.
go. I love an example. I love a painted picture. That's so helpful for people who recognize themselves in both profiles as you're reading it. Like, I know people that would put themselves on both lists. And I think that's honestly a lot of people. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I think that's where if, it feels right for you, you could do both, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be both. They work through completely different mechanisms. There's no redundancy here. Reishi's working on the stress response very strongly with the HPA axis and nervous system tone, that GABA, that felt sense of calmness from the GABA pathway. Lion's mane is working on a neural architecture and brain health pathway. So together they are supporting the full system. And oftentimes people who come to us and say, like, wow, reishi and lion's mane together, right? That
Yeah.
synergy of, experiencing both of those improvements can be helpful and maybe what you need.
Yeah. I always say it to you.
Better
Together.
together. Yeah.
Together is my favorite place to be. Better together. And
Yeah.
that's not different for mushrooms. We are closely connected to them. So it's no surprise. They
Mm.
are, and there's research on this, that the synergistic effects when you take two together, the bioactive compounds in each of them are enhancing the benefits of the other, just like we enhance each other when we're together. That's why this is not a solo podcast. That's why it takes two of us to come together to get that whole picture. So, what does the timeline look like? I know people are thinking of that. They're like, when? Well, that's called impatience, and let's let that go. But be serious with us. I think this is where expectations really can get in the way.
Yeah. I will say I agree with you. There is patience. And something that I will say too is that something that has been chronic and it's been going on for a long time might not be shifted right away.
Yeah.
There's no one size fits all, but I would say, give it some time. You might not feel something on day 3. You might, personally, for me with reishi, I experienced it the first time I took it, that calm physiological effect. I noticed it at the time I was wearing a whoop strap. I noticed it on my HRB. But what you're doing is supporting a biological process that operates on a longer time scale. Neurogenesis, HPA axis recalibration, like you're recalibrating that entire pathway, which has implications on your hormones and other things within your body. Microbiome shifts, that doesn't occur right away.
Yeah.
The research studies that showed meaningful mood outcomes were using 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks as their time frames. So what I tell people is commit to 4 weeks before you evaluate it. Be consistent and track specific things, not general feelings. So track your sleep quality, not just the duration, but how you feel when you are waking up. Track that 3 p.m. window. Is the wall still there and how hard is it, right?
Yeah.
I like using a numbered scale, 5 being the worst or the best ever, and comparing the number. Track emotional reactivity. Did something that would have spun you out last month pass more easily this week? When you have specific concrete data points, that's going to show you the shift before you're consciously aware of it.
Absolutely. There's a trend of people throwing their Aura rings in the garbage and saying, I don't want to be dependent on it anymore. And I get it. I hear you. I've considered it, but I'm not ready to get rid of it yet because perception is a funny thing, right? We perceive things differently than they actually are sometimes, and sleep is not separate from that. So sometimes I can perceive that I had a great sleep, and then I can look at data and go, oh, like I did have a long sleep, but I got a lot of light sleep. And I noticed the effects of a lack of the deeper sleep or a lack of REM sleep and how that
Mm.
shows up in my day. And I would never know that if I wasn't using something to actually go in and it's really measuring our brain waves, it's measuring physiology. And it just to me, it's data. It's fascinating to me because then I can notice, hey, what's different? I forgot to take my reishi, and I'm honestly taking reishi and magnesium together. Or I ate really close to bedtime. And I don't normally do that, but for whatever reason, I was eating a grapefruit on the couch at 10 p.m. when I normally wouldn't do that. I just love having that information because it means that you're taking your power back and you can change that thing. So I'm not going to eat so close to bedtime for a while and see. I'm going to be consistent with the reishi and see. And I do see it. Like I can show, I've got the receipts, people will say. I can see it actually makes a difference for me. So it's not that you feel like you had a terrible sleep or you feel that you had a great sleep. There's stuff happening when you are unconscious in that sleep state. You've gone down to the delta brainwave states that your body's doing a ton of work in there. And we need some of that to be done in the deep sleep states or the REM states that just aren't happening if you're doing things. I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but people that are consuming cannabis as a way to get to sleep, all the research shows us you're not getting the amount of REM sleep that you would be getting if you weren't doing that. So I'm not saying stop that habit, but maybe try reishi instead for a little bit because the research on reishi shows that you're going to get more of that. And we need it. Our body is meant to have all of the phases of sleep. So I love that we brought this up as this just a shift, right? The shift is often quieter than people expect. It's not this sudden transformation. It's more like one day you realize that the noise got quieter. And that was for me. It was like, nothing bothers me anymore. And that's after years, but literally very few things bother me. And when something bothers me, I really pay attention. There's a lot of metacognition going on. Well, that's so interesting that that bothers me. And then I can get down to the bottom of it quickly and let it go. And that's healing to me. We were just talking about this. Healing to me is when I'm putting zero attention on the past and I have all of my energy for the present moment right here. And that's really what we want for all of us. So yeah, I'll pass it back to you on that.
Yeah, that is the experience. It's the absence of the thing that you stopped noticing.
Yeah.
A week where the 3 a.m. wake up didn't happen.
Yeah.
A meeting where the word came easily. An afternoon that passed without the wall. That's the signal. Being more present, more happy, more joyful, your best self.
Yeah. Okay. One more thing before we close. We have to go there. Quality. Because everything we've talked about today, all of this extraordinary biology, it requires that the product you're holding actually contains these compounds that Dr. Desiree talked about and at meaningful levels. And a lot of what's on the market simply does not, sadly.
And it matters. Okay, so I'm going to make this really concrete. For lion's mane, you need the haricinones to be present. Haricinones are in the fruiting body. The problem is that a huge portion of lion's mane products on the market are mycelium grown on grain. Mycelium is grown on a substrate of grain, typically rice or oats or sorghum, and that grain becomes part of the final product. If it's a mycelium on grain product, you cannot untangle the mycelium from the grain. So what you're buying is largely grain starch with some myceliated compounds mixed in, and that product isn't going to give you the terpenoid levels that we talked about today. You want to look for fruiting body on the label. Look for beta-D-glucan content that is actually listed. Beta-D-glucans are the bioactive polysaccharides that signal real mushroom content. They're great for gut support. If a product is only listing total polysaccharides and not specifying beta-D-glucans, that polysaccharide number is almost certainly inflated by starch, and it's probably cereal polysaccharides.
Yeah.
And not actual mushrooms. And for haricinones to be present, they need to be a dual extract.
Yeah. And we were doing a presentation this week, Dr. Des, and I did something I never do. I'm going to turn 50 this summer, and I think I'm just becoming a rebel.
Do it. You love it.
And I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it in this episode. It was special for that lovely group of women. We were so lucky. They were so smart. They were just so well educated ahead of coming to us that we just really got nerdy with the science. And I'm like, I'm just not going to beat around the bush anymore. The 3 top performing mushroom supplement companies on the market today are what Dr. Desiree just described to you. When I say performing, I'm talking about money.
Yeah.
The 3 companies out there that do the most revenue in the mushroom industry are mycelium on grain. Stop the insanity. Why is this? Because they're cheap. If you are buying something, and actually one of them is actually not even that inexpensive, but of course a product that is mostly grain, and when we see these mycelium on grain products, we know it's like 90% grain and 10% mycelium. That's facts. That's real talk. That's cheap. You know, you could buy rice and you could buy oats and you could buy sorghum pretty cheap these days. The mycelium is tremendously expensive. And if we want great mycelium products that are part of pharmaceutical research, that mycelium is being grown in a nutrient broth in a bioreactor. We'll save that for another episode. But I want you to know that if you're taking a mushroom product that doesn't say on the label that it is 100% organic certified fruiting body only, you're not getting what Dr. Desiree just described. And there's a cost associated with that. If it's concentrated enough to be in line with the research and high quality enough, you're going to have to pay for what that means in the process of getting it to us. So let's talk about reishi specifically while we're here, because this is another place where that dual extraction really becomes a non-negotiable.
Yeah, for sure. So the ganoderic acids, which are triterpenes unique to reishi that we've been talking about today, they can cross the blood-brain barrier and modulate your HPA axis and GABA signaling. They're not water soluble. They require alcohol extraction to be drawn out of the mushroom and in the end material. A hot water only extract of reishi will give you the beta glucans and polysaccharides, which have their own value, but you won't get the triterpenes. They need to be a dual extract. And you'll miss the specific compounds that are most relevant to everything that we've discussed today about mood and the nervous system. Reishi, lion's mane, and even chaga as well, even though we didn't discuss it today, need to be a dual extract. There are molecules that are alcohol soluble and won't be present. So you won't get those mood positive benefits without it.
Absolutely. We want both things to pull out all of the beneficial compounds inside. I always say we don't want to leave any medicine on the table. Like it always makes me, I pick up a product sometimes and it is fruiting body only, but it's not an extract. So I've taken, say, like a reishi mushroom, dried it, ground it up, and you've got a mushroom powder. Well, that's not a mushroom extract. And I think that's hard for people to understand sometimes, but it's this extraction process Dr. Desiree is talking about that makes these beneficial compounds bioavailable to us. Our body can actually use them. So if you're buying reishi for its calming, its stress regulating, its sleep supporting properties, and your product hasn't been dual extracted, it's not an extract, it's just a powder, you're missing the active constituents responsible for all those effects we just talked about. Don't waste your money.
Don't waste your money. Look for dual extract. Look for the triterpene content to be listed on the label alongside beta-D-glucans. That transparency is the signal that a company has done the extraction correctly and is confident enough in their products to show you what's in it, and probably means that they've done third-party lab testing.
Yes. So important and so expensive, but I don't want to take it if I don't know that it's in there. I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste my energy. I just want to take it and get on with it and know what's happening. And then there's the dose. Please, out there, do not overlook the dose. Research studies use meaningful doses, right? The clinical trials showing these mood benefits, they're using up to around 1,000 milligrams of lion's mane per day of an extract. So that's 2 of our capsules. But if your capsule only has 100 milligrams in it, you're not going to see the results, right? You're going to have to take 10 of those capsules in that product. So you have to do a little mushroom math. And lucky you, we did a whole episode on that. And we shared our screen and like we were so nerdy. We had a big whiteboard going. So go back and find the mushroom math episode. Maybe we'll link that below too, so that you can just get really smart in that supplement aisle or online, wherever you're shopping, and really understand the dose you're getting in that powdered extract blend or in that capsule. So you know what you're actually taking.
Yeah. And as always, if you're currently taking any medications and whatnot, please consult your healthcare provider. That's why we do extracts, is because we want to make sure that you're getting the compounds that have been studied in the research for their health benefits, but also that you're getting a therapeutic dose. How much can you take in as little amount as possible? Gone are the days of taking 12 capsules and paying hundreds of dollars per month just for fun.
Yeah, just for fun. Absolutely. So yes, your health team, whoever they are, and you should have a team, but they should always know what you're taking. So just be honest. All right. So let's land this. And here is what I want you to walk away with today. Mood is physiological. I'll say it again. Your mood is part of your physiology. It has biological roots in your nervous system, in your stress hormones, in your neurochemistry, in your gut. If something feels off and your doctor says that you're normal, that does not mean that you're imagining it, right? It may mean that the root is somewhere that the standard blood panel just isn't looking.
Exactly. And lion's mane contains terpenoid compounds, hericenones, that are unique in the entire food supply. They cross the
Yeah.
blood-brain barrier and they stimulate nerve growth factor and brain-derived neurotrophic factor. They can help to reduce neuroinflammation. They support the gut microbiome and the gut-brain axis. The early human research shows reductions in anxiety, depression, and sleep disruption with measurable increases in BDNF. So for anyone experiencing brain fog, flatness, or a narrowing of their emotional range, this mushroom is speaking directly to the neural substrate of that substance, that experience.
Yeah, I love it. Reishi is the one that contains those ganoderic acids, the triterpenes that also cross the blood-brain barrier. They work through three distinct mechanisms we talked about today. The HPA axis modulation to normalize the cortisol rhythm. And I love we are in a rhythm. The GABAergic support to restore the nervous system's ability to calm down. And then the anti-inflammatory effects that reduce the neuroinflammation, which is sometimes driving mood disruption. And then that 2026 randomized controlled trial showed measurable reductions in anxiety, cortisol, and inflammation at 12 weeks. 12 weeks, that's 3 months. So for anyone who is wired, reactive, you can't wind down, you're waking up at 3 a.m, reishi is addressing the root cause of those symptoms.
And for both mushrooms, fruiting body only, dual extraction for both, a therapeutic dose, third-party tested, USDA organic certified. Those things tell you what you're holding in your hand will actually do what we have described today.
Yeah, and give it real time, right? Give it at least 4 weeks and then track those specifics. The shift is quieter than you might expect, but it is real.
And a reminder that you might need to hear today is you're not broken. Your system might just be running without the support that it needs, and that is a solvable problem.
I love that. I love a solvable problem. That's exactly it. And if you want help figuring out which mushroom or which combination is right for where you are right now, luckily we have a quiz created by our fabulous and brainy Dr. Desiree, and it's at eversiowellness.com. It's right there now. We put it easy for you. We want to make your life easy. It's right on the homepage of the website. It takes like 2 minutes and it will help to point you in the right direction to get you started. We'll also link it for you down in the show notes, and we'll link some of the key research that we cited today, that all those studies, all those beautiful studies that were there, because we read them and we want you to read them. And we think you out there in our community, we think you deserve the actual research. And we're here. We're your girls. We're here to bring it for you.
Be well, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Eversio Experience podcast.
Thank you so much for being here today and for giving us this time with you. We hope that something in the episode landed, whether that's a new perspective, a piece of research that you hadn't heard before, or just a reminder that your health is worth taking seriously. And if someone in your life could benefit from what we talked about today, then please share this episode with them. That is genuinely how we grow. One conversation, one person at a time.
And if you're ready to bring functional mushrooms into your daily routine, we would love to support that. Head to eversiowellness.com and use the code podcast15 at checkout. It is our way of saying thank you for being a part of this community, and it saves you 15% on your order. And if you are not sure where to start, that's okay, because we have a mushroom wellness quiz on our website that will point you in exactly the right direction.
And if you haven't yet left us a rating and a review, or subscribed to the podcast, or followed us on social media, all of the links for that are in our show notes. And we would so appreciate your support there. It just helps us reach more people who need to hear this work. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with us.
Until next time, be well.